And so I kind of learned redistricting at her knee, so to speak. But happy to be here, excited to have you guys experience the movie and really make that connection back to Washington State.
Thanks, Allison. So also here is Judge Mary Kay Becker, retired judge, who was one of the 4 voting members of Washington State's first constitutional redistricting commission in 1991. Oh. And Judge Becker, what else would you like us to know?
That's pretty much the most relevant thing for the participation today. I was a member of the Washington State Legislature representing the 42nd Legislative District from 1975 through 1982. And that was probably one of the reasons why I was selected. I was selected by the Senate Democratic Caucus to be their delegate, their member on the Redistricting Commission. After that, I was a lawyer while that was going on, and then later I became a judge. I was a judge with the Washington State Court of Appeals for 25 years. That's what I just recently retired from. So I'm a retired lawyer, judge, legislator now.
Thank you. Thank you. And also Julie Johnson, who is enrolled Lummi member and co-chair. And she's a member of the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. And Julie, would you tell us more about yourself? And I'm also interested in the listening sessions that you conduct.
Oh, I forgot to write that down, listening session, I will. My name is Julie Johnson. I'm an enrolled Lummi member. I'm from the Koina family. My my great-grandfather was Henry Koina. If you've studied any of the history at Lummi, where the Northwest Indian College is located now, is where my family land is. But I'm chair of the Native American Caucus for the Washington State Democrats, and I've been informed that we have the largest caucus now in the United States. I'm co-chair of the Native Vote Committee for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, which is a group that it's about 58 tribes belong to that. And of course, I'm sure you all know that we have 29 tribes in the state of Washington. I'm a committee member for the Clallam County Democrats. I'm the first Native woman elected to that position. And I'm vice chair of the 24th Legislative District, which includes Jefferson, Clallam, and part of Grays Harbor. In this last year, I decided to run for Electoral College, and so I won after 3 votes. I tied 2 times, and it was all done by Zoom, so I'm not sure how it was all done, but it took a day and a half, and I finally won. I'm president of the National Indian Women's Supporting Each Other. It's a nonprofit organization that recognizes the leadership of Native women in the United States, and we have an annual dinner. I've been volunteering for this group for 25 years. And this last year, when we had our honoring lunch in Washington, D.C. in February, we have it during the National Congress of American Indians Convention. We were fortunate to have Senator Harris. Kamala Harris spoke, and also Senator Maria Cantwell. So it was really a nice event. We honored 2 women. One was in tribal leadership from, gosh, now I forgot her name. That happens at my age. But she was from way down south, just past in Atlanta. Where was she from? Anyway, she was from the South. And then we also honored a young woman that has been working with the murdered and missing Native women. That's been happening probably on nearly every one of our reservations. And I'm chair of the Northwest Indian College Foundation. We have about 1,500 students from 130 different tribes, and we've been raising money for scholarships. And now we're working on trying to get our funding that we get per student. I was on the board of trustees for a state college for 10 years, Peninsula College in Port Angeles. And we don't get near the money that the states do. Our money comes from the government. And so I'm really concerned about, the fact that our Indian colleges, we have 38 in the United States, we only receive about half the money that the Black universities and colleges receive from the government. And so that's an issue that I'm working on. And I'm a volunteer. I'm not working, and I'm doing things that I enjoy.
It's
So,
great.
So I have a question. Anyone can answer. So in Washington, we have a bipartisan commission. We don't have one party drawing the district lines. We have 2 Democratic appointees and 2 Republican appointees and a non-voting chair chosen by consensus of the 4. So what does this do to redistricting in Washington? And do we have any problems with that?
Who would you like to answer that?
Oh,
Who
it's
knows the answer?
Allison, if you want to take a shot at it, that'd be great.
Sure. So the League of Women Voters did an analysis of the last 3 redistricting cycles and talked to some of the commissioners, and we'll love to hear what Mary has to say about this. It tends to be a negotiation between the 2 parties, as you might imagine. And our analysis leads to show that it tends to protect incumbents. It tends to have many safe districts for each party. And we have seen that at least throughout this decade, we've had fairly close representation in both the House and the Senate. I have some more details on the percentages of competitive districts and stuff if anyone's interested, but the good news is we don't have extreme partisan gerrymandering like in Wisconsin or Michigan was experiencing, or Ohio or North Carolina, those ones that you hear in the news all the time. And we have representation of both parties, and they tend to hash things out in the chambers. The bad news is that if your demographics or if your party affiliation changes in the state, then we're still at 2 and 2. And the latest poll I saw was a couple years old now, but as much as 40% of Washingtonians declare themselves independent of either party, and we don't have any kind of representation of folks that might not affiliate themselves with either party. Start there.
All right. Judge Mary Kay Becker, do you want to speak to that from your experience?
You know, I think that the partisan nature of redistricting in Washington is built into the constitutional amendment that created the commission. It has that. I mean, in other words, there's an assumption there that there are 2 parties, and by giving them an equal voice in the commission, that you will tend to get more equally balanced districts that could elect either a Republican or a Democrat, depending on the political tides at the time. And that's just the way it is. I mean, I think that if the independent voters in Washington wanted to organize into a party that thought, alike in many respects as the Democrats and the Republicans do, then there would be cause to want to amend the law or the Constitution so that they could be recognized. But I don't see that happening, because the independents are people who don't want to attach themselves to a particular agenda or party. So what happens, and it is a nakedly political process, if those of you who are in attendance here want to get involved in the coming redistricting, that's one of the things to face right at the beginning. I mean, I think that there are, as I remember it from 30 years ago now, there always are people who think, why should there be politics involved in this at all? Why don't we just turn it over to like a geographer at the University of Washington, or somebody like that who doesn't hold a political position, doesn't have any influence of a party, and just sort of let the chips fall where they may. Have the people always will say, why don't we have the commissioners not know where the incumbents live, and then we'll just do it in a very sort of rational and unpolitical way. that just simply isn't going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable that the commissioners know where the incumbents are. It's inevitable that the commissioners who are appointed by the Democrats are going to try to protect the Democratic incumbents, and vice versa. What happened in the year that I was a commissioner, and I think it tends to be this way too, is that simply by the nature of where how many districts there are. I mean, there have to be in Washington 49 state legislative districts. Simply by the nature of that number and where the concentrations of people are, and given people's political leanings, there are going to be a number of safe districts. They're going to be in King County around Seattle. There's just no way that you cannot have districts that are safe for Democrats. And the same thing is true for Republicans throughout much of Eastern Washington. Nevertheless, the fact that the Democrats and Republicans are 2 each on the redistricting commission tends to mean that there will be as many as maybe a third of the districts that really don't lean one way or the other. And because of the equality and representation, they will tend to be drawn as independent districts. I mean, for example, you can look at the way Whatcom County is right now. And at the beginning of the decade, you had the 40th district, which is pretty blue. It's San Juan County, South Bellingham, and North Skagit County. It's kind of an environmental district, given the nature of it, and it tends to lean Democratic. When I was in the legislature in the 70s, I represented the 42nd district, which at that time included all of Bellingham, but it also included all of Linden. It was thought to be a pretty evenly drawn district, and in fact it was. When I first won election as a Democrat, it was a very very close election. I won, I think, by about 1 or 2% of the vote. But to go back to the way it is now, I think it was thought that the 42nd district would be a Republican district. It's the district that at the beginning, I think you had Doug Erickson, and most recently Luann Van Werven, and I forget the guy that
Vincent Buys.
Yeah, Vincent Buys. Okay, so you had 3 Republicans. All right, now there's 3 Democrats. So what has happened is not that redistricting has brought about a change, but that the demographics and the mood of the electorate has changed, so that now both districts are Democratic, and that's not a function of redistricting. It's just a function of good old political activity and people changing their minds and the demographics changing. So I think Washington is fairly moderate. I mean, people can argue, and some do, that it's too bad that there aren't, like I guess Michigan did, and I think California has an even different system where instead of having politicians or people chosen by politicians to do redistricting, it's like random people, people drawn randomly from the voter rolls or some other kind of combination. And I haven't studied it to know how that is different, but my experience as a member of the Redistricting Commission 30 years ago was, I thought, pretty positive. I thought our map was pretty good. What was interesting about it was that we all were kind of state-oriented politicians, and we got done with the legislative map for the state much quicker than we did with the congressional map. We had the job of drawing a congressional map for the first time with the 9th congressional district. And so that was a challenge because, that meant that everything, all the boundaries had to change. There was no way of just keeping it the same way that it was. And again, what happened was that the 9th district, there were probably 7 or 8 politicians in the state that all thought that they were going to get elected from the 9th congressional district, and they were all using their influence to try to have it drawn in a certain way and to make sure that their residences were drawn within the district. And I think that, I remember the Republican candidates all thought they had a pretty good shot at it, but it turned out to be won by a Democrat, and that district has remained fairly solidly Democratic ever since. So it's really hard to tell, but boy, watching that movie, I'm sure glad we have a commission and that we're not like Michigan.
Right, right, right.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Well, I have a question for Julie. So, in your opinion, what are the most important criteria in drawing districts?
Well, you know, um, I got involved with the Democratic Party, and I've been a Democrat all my life, but in 2008. And how I got involved with redistricting is Joe Pacotis, the former chairman of the Colville tribe in the, I think it's called the 7th LD, over there above Spokane, up in that area. One of the largest tribes in the state ran for Congress. And I was excited about, you know, supporting a Native person running. He graduated from the UW with his master's in business administration, was just a great person. And I thought, you know, I liked him and I thought other people would like him. Well, one day he told me, he said, you know, Julie, he said, half my tribe can't vote for me. And I teased him and I said, well, they don't like you? You know, and he said, no, he said, they can't vote for me because our tribe is split in half. And that's when I first learned about redistricting. And then I spoke to a man from Yakima, same situation. The tribe is split in half. Then I looked up the regulations, and the regulations say they try not to break up cities, you know, keep interest groups in the same district. Well, you know, that if you apply that to a tribe, and our two largest tribes in the state, you know, that shouldn't be happening where they're being split in half. We should be treated like other people, you know, equitable treatment. And so that was about 5 years ago. So I just remembered that we needed to do something about that, that we needed to get involved. We have 29 tribes in the state of Washington with a huge amount of, you know, land. And so I've worked on getting a resolution passed by the 58 tribes that belong to the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, and also through the Native American Caucus, that we have a Native person appointed to that commission. I think it's time that we have a seat at the table. And so both those resolutions have passed. Also in Yakima, the Yakima the Democratic Party over there passed a resolution saying they want to have hearings, they want to have input, they want to be able to communicate, you know, what their needs are. Did I answer your question? I'm going off and.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
great. That's great.
So that's how I got involved in it. And then the other thing. Now, I've been involved in Native American politics at the local, regional, national levels. And when the Judge Bolt decision was made regarding fishing issues, Senator Slade Gorton opposed that, and he lost, you know, the cases. And it seems to me, and it doesn't seem to me, I know for a fact, probably out of the 570 some tribes in the United States, probably 500 of them knew who Slade Gorton was because he opposed legislation back in DC, you know, when it came to issues. So who was on the last redistricting commission? Slade Gorton. What tribes got split in half? The two largest tribes in our state. You know, I go to Safeway store and I see Gordon Fish, you know, his family owns a fish company, you know, and I just shake my head, you know, he's just been mad at us. And I know he passed away, and I'm sure he did some really good things, you know, but for the Native people, nearly every tribe in the country knows who he is. And I just, you know, so I'm really working hard to get a Native person appointed.
Luckily, we sent 3 Native persons' names to the caucus leaders in the House and the Senate, and they are under consideration. Yes.
Cool.
As the Washington Voting Justice Coalition, the League of Women Voters, and the Census Alliance. We worked with Speaker Jenkins and Senator Billig, who are leading the efforts. And so it's wonderful that they're under consideration. Cross your fingers if they get.
Was Brian Gladysby one of them?
What's that?
Was Brian Gladysby one of them? That's who the tribe supported. Brian Gladysby, the former.
I'm not sure, but I can get you the names.
Oh, I would love to have
And
that. I appreciate that.
We have confirmation from the two of them that they will appoint a woman or a person of color or a woman of color. That they are purposely avoiding appointing a white male to the Democratic appointees. So I think that's one that they gave us advocates a voice in the process by being able to appoint, suggest appointees basically. But we should get announcements here in the 1st of December from the Democrats on who their appointees are.
Great. Well, I just wanted to share, we supported Brian Gladysby, who's a former chairman of the Swinomish tribe, also was chairman of the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians and the National Congress of American Indians. I also talked to NARF, which is a Native American Rights Foundation, which has about 17 lawyers at work for them, and they work on Native rights issues. And they've made a commitment that if Brian is appointed, they will help him because they have, a lawyer that has really good experience with mapping and, looking at mapping and that sort of thing. And that's gonna become a national issue in the United States for us. We're gonna start working on that now for the next 10 years.
Excellent.
Great,
so let's
good.
explain a little bit. There's a question in the chat about all of the criteria.
One thing first. Yeah, let's go to Catherine first. She had her hand up first, and we'll go to Catherine, and then we'll go to that.
Okay, so there's a couple of problems that I see. And just because we have a system that's kind of okay, doesn't mean we can't make it better. So I think that there's an issue that the 5th person is non-voting. I think that's a concern because that encourages that negotiation. Well, if we give you this district, we want this district. So I think that's an issue. And I just think like in terms of that citizen programs, citizen-run programs, just like in police review, that those are better. And I think that, we might want to consider whether we want to move to a citizen review committee rather than, because as long as it's run out of the legislature, it's going to continue to be partisan and that negotiation's going to happen. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Sure. So Arizona has a 5-member commission with the 5th member being a voting member. And if you read the history of what happened to that independent member, it was horrendous how much flack she got for not, one side thought she was Democrat, the other side thought she was a Republican. She got ousted by the governor and then put back by the state Supreme Court. And it was just awful. So one of the benefits, and Mary Kay can speak to this too, one of the benefits of having the chair be non-voting is that they tend to focus on the public interface and the running the nonpartisan staff. And it forces the partisan members to actually give a little, because you don't want them to dig their heels in and then have the 5th be the deciding vote. So you can see how the dynamics would be quite different if you had that 5th voting chair. You
would always be wanting to, if you were one of the 4, you would be trying to win the 5th over. You would be trying, if you were a Democrat, you'd be trying to make that person be a Democrat. I mean, you would,
and vice versa.
The problem is you end up in a situation like the commission that decided the 1876 election between Tilden and Hayes, where there was a big commission, it was evenly divided, and then somebody supposedly neutral was chosen, and then I think they were bribed. And that's how we ended up with Jim Crow and Reconstruction.
Oh my goodness.
But I mean, there's things to be said, I guess, for both sides. But I having been through it, I really, as I say, that when you first come at this, you tend to think this should not be a job for politicians. This should be, just random people trust to their common sense. But I think that the way that it's structured has a lot of wisdom to it. And I know in our case, we felt good about it. Both sides did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to think about where we've evolved to and how many more citizens are not identifying with either party. I got a chance to talk with the commissioners from the California Commission, and the people who are citizen members, they said it was the most amazing experience, and they put their heart and soul into it, and they had wonderful support from staff who knew the maps and knew GIS. And of course, we're getting even more technology that helps folks draw the maps and whatnot. So the commissions, and of course Michigan's commission is going to be going for the first time. The league has floated some ideas around adding citizens to the commission, going to a 9-member commission with adding 2 citizens that are partisan and then 3 citizens that are quote independent of either party. And so you'd have 3, 3, and 3, and you'd have to require, one of each to vote or something like that. But it's going to take quite a groundswell to do any kind of that. As Mary Kay said, that this is a constitutional amendment. So, and you can't modify the Constitution via initiative. So you really do have to sway your legislators to change this commission. So it's one of the reasons we're starting now during this session to say, if we really do want to change the commission, we really have to have a grassroots effort to say, this is what the people want.
I think there would have to be a case, with particular examples that would say, not just theoretically, we think it might be better if it were done a different way,
Yeah.
but what went wrong as a result of having it be the way that it is?
I think that it's interesting, the competitive analysis, because I'm with you. My grandmother, when she did, Mary Ellen McCaffrey, when she did redistricting in the 60s, and then again, when it had to be redone in the 70s, their philosophy was that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 kind of thing, to, each third safe and then 1/3 in the middle. And the data shows that less than 20% of the district races are competitive. And so what does that mean if we're not getting to that ideal 1/3 of actually being either party being able to win it? And about 10% of the races are uncontested. There is not another party that even decides to run.
Oh, you have the other thing that goes into this is in Washington, you have the top 2 primaries, so that,
Yes.
that's another big change.
All right, well, this has been an amazing, great panel discussion so far. So we're going to go back to the movie, but we'll have another 20 minutes or so at the end of the movie to ask some more questions. And we want to talk specifically about what citizens can do to get involved in, and I want to hear what their role is. And in the interest of time, I just copied and pasted from the Washington State Redistricting Commission report that Allison had alluded to, the other criteria in the Constitution, the statutory requirements for how to draw the line. So you can take a look at that too.
The full report's on the State League website.
Yeah, I'll put the link in for that too. So
in 2021, the Washington Redistricting Commission will hold public forums on redistricting. And the Speak Up Schools is something that we'd like to hear about. How are you planning to help people deliver effective testimony?
Great. So we are helping local leagues all around the state. I think we've got 12 confirmed to hold what we're calling a Speak Up School. And the Speak Up School is designed to inspire folks to testify, but also teach you what makes good testimony, how to deliver your testimony, and what kind of some ideas for some content that you might put in. We're not brainwashing people. We're taking your content and we're helping you create and craft a great 3-minute presentation that you could then deliver for the redistricting commission. So the state team, there's been 6 or 8 of us that have been working for the last year to create modules, and we're doing a train the trainer session coming up here in a couple of weeks. And I believe Whatcom Bellingham, you guys are coming, right?
Yes.
And so do you guys know when you're going to hold your school yet? What time, what month or anything? Sometime in the winter, right? Late winter, early spring.
I think we're in early stages yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we're requesting somewhere between February and April, because we believe the commission will start its first public input stuff at the earliest would probably be May, because they got to get going and hire staff and get organized and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm so excited because it wasn't me. It was all these ladies. We got 2 professional or 2 folks that were professors in College of Communications, and they're going to teach us how to give good testimony. And then we were trying to recruit all sorts of people to be coaches and train them so that lots of people to participate. So you can have like a one-on-one or a one-on-3 coaching session, so you can practice your testimony and people can give you feedback and you can improve it, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's fun. There's also going to be some optional sessions where I can come and do a redistricting 101 like I did 2 years ago. We can learn, you know, the nitty gritties of the Washington Commission structure. We can talk about all of the court cases and the federal and the Supreme Court stuff and all of those cool metrics that they were referring to, you know, why Wisconsin was punted down the road and where we are at now. I also want to mention the Data Lenses project. If you go to, I'll put it in the chat too, tinyurl/data lenses. And this is a study of the demographics of Washington from 5 different lenses. And lenses by, I mean, like what kind of demographics? So ethnicity, tribal lands, business, environment, all those kinds of things. And this Data Lenses study really is a deep dive into the pondering of how do you balance all these communities of interest? What makes a community of interest? And this idea of voting power, right? We know what happens when nefarious people crack and pack certain communities or certain parties into areas. But what's the opposite of that? What is, quote, fair redistricting, right? It's a balancing of interests. And so it's this Data Lenses study is a deep dive into how do you think about this balancing of lots of interest. Kit, did I hit everything?
Yes, thank you. That's great. Yes.
And I wanted to ask Judge Becker, so in 1991, was there a testimony that made a difference in the deliberation of the district lines? Do you remember?
Well, we traveled around the state at some time during that year, and we had a number, 8 or 10 different community meetings, and they were relatively well attended. I would say 20 to 30 or 40 people maybe would come out. It was, we wanted to do it because, you know, you can read about or, you know, maybe watch presentations of the various demographics of the state. I mean, one of the things that we did was the state patrol plane was made available to us so that we could fly as a group over Marysville, which was at that time a city that we all had tended to think of as a little town that had a strawberry festival. But what was really happening to it, and you could fly over it and you could see that the suburbs and the developments around Marysville were really proliferating, something that, you know, I remember that made a difference to us thinking about, you know, that area. I would say that, you know, just on the subject of, in general, I would say that those of you who want to get involved in making testimony, one of the things that you should take advantage of is that I'm sure that the commission will make it possible for people to use the software that they have and try to draw their own maps. One of the exercises that we went through before we went to different communities was each of the four of us sat down and drew what we thought would be the optimal map. In other words, we gerrymandered according to which political party we were favoring. So, and different things that we wanted to accomplish. One of my objectives, I'll just recall this, is I was following right along with Julie Johnson's comment on Slade Gorton, who, as far as the Democrats are concerned, was always the Darth Vader of redistricting. And I knew that he was trying to make my home territory. I mean, I live in Bellingham, but I grew up out in Jefferson County over by the ocean. And I know that community fairly well. And I knew that he was trying to turn it into a Republican stronghold. And so one of the things that I was trying to do and was successful in doing was to put the Olympic Peninsula into Norm Dix's congressional district so that it would remain solidly Democratic, and so that the communities of interest, which to me, I thought that, a lot of what the people over in the Olympic Peninsula were kind of more similar to Norm Dix's district than they were, around Tacoma and Bremerton and so forth and Kitsap, than they were to Whatcom, Skagit, Island, and San Juan. And coincidentally, it meant that whoever represented the second congressional district, which was Al Swift at that time, did not have to constantly go back and forth by plane or ferry over to the other side, over to the Olympic Peninsula. Now, this is an example. I know it doesn't really answer your question, but we heard about things like that. One of the things, the reason I say experiment with the software and see what it's like to draw a district, you will learn that way how difficult it is to do everything that people want you to do. It's very easy to go before the commission and say, we think that Aberdeen and Hoquiam should be in the same district, or we think the city of Bellingham should be all in one district. But if you start at a particular corner of the state and start drawing your map, for instance, you maybe start up at the northwest corner, you might be able to get Aberdeen and Hoquiam in the same district. But then you lose other things. And so that was one of the things that we all wanted to do and we all were unable to do. We were not able to get Aberdeen and Hoquiam in the same district. And as you see now up here in the northwest corner, I think one of the things you have to do is, do you or do you not like having Whatcom County divided into two districts? Because you could go back to the way it was. You could have, excuse me, I'm just taking a loaf of bread out of the oven. But maybe it's good the way it is. I mean, Julie was saying, she would like to make sure that the two largest tribal communities are, that they are not divided, because in the past they have been divided in order to diminish their political cohesion and their political influence. And that may be what you conclude, but there may be other parts of the state. Talking about packing and cracking. Sometimes, one of the problems we ran into, frankly, was in the King County area. The Democrats wanted to spread more Democrats out into all the different state legislative districts so that we would enhance the chances of electing Democrats, because it was disadvantageous to the Democrats to pack them all into the core Seattle districts. We would, they'd be 70-80% Democratic, and we were, quote, wasting those votes. On the other hand, though, we had to be responsive to the Voting Rights Act, and at that time there was, African-American communities in the Seattle area, particularly down at the south end, were particularly concerned about getting enough of their communities packed into districts so that they could elect one of their own in that district, to make it possible to elect a Black legislator, of which there were, very few at the time. So you get these two, that's one of the things that I would recommend that you do if you're going to have a group, if you're going to work as a group and say, here's what we want. And I would recommend that if it's possible, because if 30 different people come in and say, well, I see Whatcom County this way and I want it to be like this, but every other person has a slightly different idea. That will be less effective than if a group came in and said, we really like it the way it is. Try to keep the district lines as much like they are as possible so that you have a strong, as I said, I personally see the 40th as kind of an environmentally oriented district. And really so is the 42nd, except it has in the past elected, people like Doug Erickson, but maybe it won't if the lines stay the same way that they are. I mean, it all depends on what you want. So, I mean, this is the advantage of every 10 years, the redistricting comes around and you have the chance to shake things up. You can either try to keep the way they are, or you can say, we'd like to have it be totally different. We'd like to try something new. We'd like to reach out and have, one of the things I liked about my district back when I was in the 42nd, I kind of liked the fact that I had both Bellingham and Linden, because I thought they were both interesting. I thought they were both fun to represent. Linden didn't vote for me, but they had interesting problems with farms and things that I liked working on. So, it will determine, what is the legislator that you elect from those districts? What are they going to do? What are they going to be responsive to? What would you like them to be responsive to? When they come out to speak to you after they've been elected and they give a report on what they've been doing, what would you like to hear them say? Would you like to hear them say that they help the environment, or that they help the farmers, or that they really concentrated on police reform, or that is the budget getting out of hand? Do we want to really cut taxes? I mean, what is it that we want? If you can talk about that in advance and come to the commissioners with a cohesive thought and present it based on having undertaken at least a dry run with the experience of how difficult it is to draw a map of the whole state with 49 different districts. Do you want them all to be even? Would you like, maybe that's one of the things you would like. You would like to have, forget about issues, forget about Democrats and Republicans, just make them as evenly drawn as you can, and forget about where the incumbents live. I don't think that argument is going to get very far, but that is one of the things you could say. And if enough people said it, across the state, who knows?
Thank you. Thank you. So Julie, I'm wondering, you'd mentioned to me that you do listening sessions where you train people to speak before legislators. What's been your experience about on that? And what are things that you try to help people to do to be effective when speaking?
Well, I agree with what the former speakers have said. One of the things that when I've done listening sessions, basically for tribes and program managers, to get them used to having to testify or ask funding agencies what they need. And years ago, I worked for the Lower Elwood tribe, and one of my responsibilities was to secure research money on how to take down 2 dams. And my job was to raise $1.6 million to hire people. And they were really, really poor, and they didn't have a lobbyist, and I'd never been a lobbyist. And I went to DC and met with Norm Dix. And, but I watched and I listened, and, the testimony, whatever we present, we need to have it brief. We need to be able to say, refer to the regulations of the redistricting, like I have the regulations right here. And it talks about having communities stay together, and use that in your testimony so that the people that are on the commission will know that we're following the rules and setting our priorities, and then they can vote for us. And so that's basically, what I've done. But in organizing a listening session, it gives people experience in testifying, to be brief, not to talk and talk and talk, because once you talk too long, you lose the people. And just, not have more than 3 pages. And the thing I learned in Washington, D.C. is that, like when I was in Patty Murray's office or Norm Dix's office or Senator Cantwell, they were meeting with people every half hour. And I was wondering how their staff could keep up on everything. So what I told when I did training, I said, do the homework. If we're going to go after money, say from the Department of the Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, then say that's where that you need support, that you want support, and this is a budget line item, and this is the person that's in charge of it, and this is what you need to do, and just be very direct, and say it very briefly. So I say the same thing about redistricting. If I were testifying, I would use their regulations and speak to that regulation so that the commissioners could approve it. I'm not saying it doesn't always work that way, but that's basically what I've done over the years. And we did raise 1.6 million. I had a secretary that worked with me. And the 2 dams did come down, and it was a $350 million project. I didn't get the appropriations for the 350, but we had laid the groundwork so that it could be done, and I supported them and know them. But to be successful, you need to not just go in and tell someone that you want something done. You've got to do your homework, and write and speak to that. And don't talk too long.
I totally agree with that. And I would just reiterate that I think that the homework that you could do, as I say, is to try to draw a map. In other words, one way to do it is to say, look, I think that we should do the following things and keep the following communities together and so forth. And here is how you can do it. Here is a map that does what we want done.
And one of the things that, you heard me say we're recommending Brian Gladys to be the former chair of the Swinomish tribe. I also, and I mentioned NARF earlier, the Native American Rights, that we have a lawyer that they know how to do mapping. They know how to look at the statistics. In the state of Washington, I've got my numbers here. Every district is supposed to, they try to have like 130,000 people, in each district. And that information is, of course, on the computer.
That'll increase to almost 170 this time.
Is that right?
7.5 million people.
170?
Yep.
Wow. I couldn't remember the number. Was it 130,000?
137, 236 last time. Yeah, but it could be as much as 170 next time, all based on census population data, which we'll find out.
Well, I was looking at the population of the natives in each, in those areas. It was interesting.
So I recommend, and what I'm using is Dave's redistricting app. That's available now. The commission may put one on their website, but Dave's redistricting app, just Google that, is available now. It's a free nonprofit that's putting out a free mapping. Right now it has 2010 census data in it, or you can switch to I think it's 2018 American Community Service survey data if you want to try to start thinking about the maps. That's what I'm working on. I'm gonna do a legal set of maps for the League of Women Voters, and we're gonna do a bunch of what we're calling mapping parties. So get folks together like you guys and say, what Judge Becker was talking about. What don't you like? What do you like? What are the issues, and how would drawing the lines change those issues?
Well, for example, to just take the city of Bellingham, for example. So it's divided. Now, some people might say that's a bad thing because people who live in the city of Bellingham are used to voting for Bellingham City Council and mayor, and they're aware of the issues that affect the city. But other people might say, well, it's really kind of cool that we have the city of Bellingham in 2 different legislative districts, because that means that when the city has a particular interest, there's 2 different groups of legislators and not just one. If you're all packed into, one district, then maybe your influence is too divided. So I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer to that. It's just a question of that's what you think about when you're a community.
That's what I talk about as voting power, whatever group you are. In that case, it's citizens of Bellingham, right? The city of Bellingham. How do you want to deploy your voting power? Do you want to put more of it in one district, spread it out? among other districts. One of the interesting things that the Data Lens project brought up was, if we honor the native tribes and say, hey, they really should have all of those tribal members or those that live on the reservation should be in one district, it may actually dilute the communities of color voting power because of the way the lines work. If you pack more folks of color, right, into those districts. And so it's an interesting statistical analysis and kind of human analysis of where do we want those people, right? And therefore the percentage of voting power they may have in any given district.
You know, one of the problems that we're facing on the tribes is a lot of us, you know, have only gotten involved with voting. You know, it's only been the last 20 years. I can remember when the census was done about 20 years ago. I just moved to Nia Bay from Seattle. I grew up in Nia Bay. I'm Lummi, but I grew up out here on the Olympic Peninsula and then lived in Seattle for a while, came back home. But I didn't want to share any information with the census because I thought, you know, they were investigating Indians. You know, some of the boats down here have been, you know, somebody used guns to shoot holes in them. You know, there were just some ugly things going on. And so I understand why a lot of our people are afraid to get involved, or uncomfortable, I should say, not afraid, but uncomfortable to get involved. It's two different worlds. You know, our cultures are so different. And so gradually we're getting people involved. And I'm really interested in what Native people that you've recommended. I've really worked hard to you know, get our people running for public office. We have 8 people elected now in the state, or 7 and 1 in Oregon. We had 6 people running for office. 2 made it. Of course, you know Deborah Lackenoff.
Yes, right.
And no one ran against her, but we also, you know, and thank you for all those votes for Judge Lewis. You know, that's historic, and I'm going to be sharing that with people around the country, you know, about her accomplishments, and, you know, the state of Washington supporting her. That's unreal. That's, you know, so we're getting there. We're getting more and more people involved, you know, so, but on a testimony, I want to ask, maybe I have a question. So when they take the testimony, will they take it, will they accept written statements?
Yes.
Okay. That's
And
just,
turn in written statements. And this year, most likely their public testimony will be online.
right.
So you'll sign up, and there'll be some
Okay.
kind of streaming system, and then they'll call your name and spotlight you for 3 minutes. Of course, though, like, personal testimony is always the most effective. I mean, people are great writers, but if you can deliver it with your personal story as well, that's why.
Could I add one other thing?
Yeah.
Now, I assume this is happening again. When we did it, you know, as I say, I was the delegate from the Senate Democratic Caucus. So part of our process was I personally met with each member of the Senate Democratic Caucus. Yes. And they, you know, and the point was to get me as informed as possible about, you know,
their district,
because they were the, you know, that person knows the political aspect of their district better than anybody else. Okay. So that's another avenue, I think, is that if you want the 40th district to stay the way it is, you might want to talk to Deborah Lackenoff and say, you know, we understand that there may be a shakeup here, and we kind of like it the way it is. Or if you have a proposal for how it should change, you know, these are, you know, this is how to draw the lines is just another issue upon which you can try to influence your legislator, who will have some influence on the negotiator. Now, obviously, the negotiator, the commissioner, isn't going to be able to please every member. You know, the best they can do is to make sure that nobody's house gets put in somebody else's district. That's kind of the bottom line, right?
Definitely do that.
But other than that, you know, it's you know, the commissioners really do have kind of a lot of independence. At least that was my experience. But I was very well informed about what different people wanted.
Allison, do you have my email address?
I or you were on some of the notes, right? So I do. We should chat.
Okay.
There's lots, but I did confirm that Brian was one of the ones in consideration. So I'm very excited for that. That some of the other people maybe weren't able to do it, but he definitely said he would if asked, kind of thing. So I think that's great. I just want to reiterate that, like, public speaking is one of the top fears of most people. Like, the only thing they fear more is death, right? And so I think, working together and practicing your testimony and realizing that the commissioners are just like Mary Kay Becker here, right? They're pleasant people and wanting to do a good job. I think that's all really important. And that if we can get together in these speak up schools, hash out some of these issues, practice, get better, then even after the redistricting commission is over, now we're better advocates for anything, for going to your state legislature and advocating, for going to your city council or county council, going to your kid's school board or school and talking to the principal or the teacher. Like, these are just skills that will help us as people be advocates for the things and the people that we love.
Well said. Well said. Well, are there any other questions that people have? We can wrap up at some point, but any other?
Well, I just want to add that I'm so thankful that you organized this Zoom meeting. I had no idea that, what people were doing on redistricting. It's new to me. I've done a lot of other things, but this is totally new to me. And I really appreciate what the League of Women Voters are doing in Whatcom County. And I just really, really appreciate it. I've learned a lot tonight,
Yeah.
I remember, when I had to work on the removal of the Elwood dams, when I came to McCaw, they wanted me to raise money to close the garbage dump and get money for a parking lot. So how do you make a parking lot exciting? But we have 120 inches of rain a year out here, so, we don't have one. It's all muddy. But
Yeah.
I just thank all of you. Haishka Siem, thank you, dear ones.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll make one more point, which is we tried to pass a modernization bill on redistricting, and just making sure that the commission was using all the latest technology, putting their meetings out in all the languages of all the diverse communities in our state. And, we really tried hard to make it something that was modern and that both parties could agree to. It was about the people of Washington state. And it failed. And it failed primarily because legislators didn't believe that people cared about redistricting.
Whoa.
And I'll tell you in the numbers, right? We have a state, last go around in 2010, we had a state of 6.5 million people, 20 meetings where the commissioners went out and said public input. Under 600 people showed up. Right? 0.001% of the public showed up, right? Now, maybe people gave some written, but not very many. So our goal with the Speak Up Schools is to turn that number, at least, we've got 1 million more people, right? So let's turn that number at least to 2,000 people that want to testify. Wouldn't that make a statement that said to legislators, we care about redistricting, we're watching, we want to vote the people we want to vote that care about our issues into these new districts. So that's my plea to come to the Speak Up Schools, to dedicate yourself to testifying so we can show legislators this really matters to the people of Washington state.
Well, and I will add that once you, what will help you probably get turnout is after the commissioners start talking about what they would like to do, because there will be specific plans probably, and then you will see that the things that you like about the districts the way they are, somebody's going to try to mess them up. I mean, in other words, that, as I say, if you have 2 strong commissioners on each side, then the negotiation is going to result in a tug of war that is more or less equal. If you don't, though, that, that's why it's always kind of worrisome when you have somebody like Slade Gorton that's trying to pull the strings either directly or from behind the scenes. You'll get an argument for something that superficially sounds good. It's going to undo cracking or packing. It's going to, unite communities of interest. What could be better? Well, you can look at it and you might find out that it's going to do something like the gerrymandering that we just heard about in that movie. If you look into it, I mean, somebody's got to be watching to see what is this really doing. And the best people to watch in a particular are the people who live in the particular area that is being redistricted. Somebody might say, oh, look at this. This is going to be great. We're going to get, the Colville reservation is going to be all in one district. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, it is. But in order to do that, we had to gerrymander so that all the rest of I'm just using this as a theoretical possibility, not really, but, you see what I mean? Everything, you pull a string and it affects something else.
My grandmother used to say it's like a fish bowl full of billiard balls, and each billiard ball is equal population. So if you move one, what happens to all the others? And
they all collapse.
Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk.
I'll tell you, it's fun. If you like maps, I remember back in the day, I used to enjoy playing Tetris on my computer when it was new, and it was very much like that. You got all these little shapes falling into place. And the maps are wonderful. If you like maps, even back 30 years ago, I still have some of them. They were just beautiful, the maps that they would draw. And you see the state of Washington in all of its glory, all of its rivers and, trees and everything. And its people, and where they are. And you can see, boy, one of the things you could see, they had a great map that showed where does a population grow? It grows along roads. You could see where somebody had, there didn't used to be a road, but now there's a state highway that goes along out here. That's where all the houses go. That's what happened in Marysville. You could see the roads going out to the east, and that's where all the new development was. And, just an amazing education to watch all that unfold on computers. Back in those days, we were not too shabby, and we certainly had excellent staff. And, I can remember hearing some people say, 10 or 15 years later, oh, it's so much more sophisticated now. I didn't believe that at all. We had very sophisticated technology 30 years ago. We knew where people were. We knew where the Democrats were. We knew where the Republicans were. We knew an awful lot about them and their voting habits. And they still know that kind of stuff. And maybe they know a little bit more about it. But it's, and it isn't really rocket science. I mean, there were like high school classes that back then, 30 years ago, that would take it on as a project. They would get the computer software and they would sit down, and it would take them about a day or two, and they would have a nice map all developed. They would mail it into us. Why don't you do it like this? So it's not, you can do it. But wait and see what somebody's trying to do to you, and then you'll get more turnout.
Yes.
I'll tell you, Norm Dix wasn't really happy when I first proposed that I was going to move him completely out of Tacoma and put him over in the Olympic Peninsula, just to make my point that we could do that. Of course, we ended up putting him back so that he could have most of his Tacoma district. But, he started to get interested in redistricting then.
It took me 2 years. It took me 2 years to convince Norm Dix to support the removal of the Elwha dams. But then when he got on board, he really supported it.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
But Slade didn't.
I know. Slade, see, Slade, one of the choices that the Redistricting Commission had to make was not only did we have to pick the non-voting chairman, but we also had to pick a lawyer. And the Secretary of State was promoting Jim Johnson, who was at that time one of the members of the Attorney General's office that had worked with the Secretary of State's office, but he also happened to be somebody who had worked hand in glove with Slade Gorton and argued those Supreme Court cases against the treaty rights. And so, the Republicans were all for him. But Shelley Yap and I, we were the two Democratic commissioners, we said, absolutely not, no way, we are not having him. And, we interviewed various people and ended up getting somebody who was just a regular, good lawyer. Independent, not the Secretary of State. But the Secretary of State is very key in this too. They supply the staff, at least they did 30 years ago, and I imagine they still do. Yeah, and I have to say, the staff was good, but all of the staff, the partisan staff from the Democrats, the partisan staff from the Republicans, the Secretary of State staff, excellent. They really took it seriously, and they had everything we needed.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really want to thank our panelists and everyone for showing up. It was really a wonderful evening, and I appreciate it. I'll send out the chat resources. There was a request. I'll send an email out to everybody of the chat resources, so you have that, and contact information for Allison and her Speak Up schools. And yeah, so thank you all. Really
Is there,
appreciate it.
where did you get the film before you say goodbye? Where did you get
Oh, well, there's a we got it through the film distributor, and they gave us the license for it. But I believe it's available now out in like on probably out in Netflix and so forth.
Okay.
But I can send you the information of who I
Okay.
contacted to get the film. Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Thank
right.
you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.